Not bad, not bad. We're familiar with starter project. Next one up, we have styled components. What are those bad boys and why we would want to use them? Before we continue, I just want to mention that I do have the course on style components. So if you're interested in more complicated setups that we're going to use in this particular project, as far as style components are concerned, consider enrolling in a course, or you can also navigate to their docs and explore different setups as well. So just to showcase how you would get up and running with style components, I'm going to navigate to their main docs and keep on scrolling. And essentially, in order to get started with style components, you need to install the package. And of course, the command would be npm install dash dash save and then styled components. Of course, I already installed styled components for you. That's why if you navigate to package.json, you'll see that we have the library. And in order to start using styled components, you need to import default from the styled components. And of course, you can call it whatever you'd want. You can call it Magruber, but in this case, I'm going to go with styled since that is somewhat of a general convention. So I'm going with import styled from and then styled components. So that's my package. And then I don't have to set up separate React component. So essentially, if I just want simple element that I would want to add the styles, I need to come up with a name. So in my case, I always go with wrapper, but of course you can, as I always, call this whatever you would want. So let's say in this case, I'm going to call this button. And then we set it equal to styled, and then whichever HTML element we would want. So if you want to set up a button, of course, you would write the button. If you want to set up the div, you would write here a div. If you want to set up the article, hopefully you get an idea. So in this case, since I have the name for the button, I might as well create a button. And then we have this interesting syntax of two backticks. So what is this one? This is a JavaScript feature. So it's not like styled components invented that. And it is called tag template literals. And essentially what that means is that this is going to be a function. And the way styled components use it, we just pass in the CSS that we would want to apply to this element. So this is how we're creating this component. We don't have to go and create a separate React component. Essentially, it's going to be done for us. And I'm going to start with simple styling, simple color styling, so we can see how it works. I'm going to go with background green and then color white. And you notice that if I'm just going to grab this button right now, I'm going to be able to render. So in here, instead of the heading 4, I'm going to add another div here. And I'll make sure that I'm returning, of course. And I'm just going to go with my button component, which of course is right now my component. Since styled components create that as a React component. So in this case, I'm going to go with button and I'll just say, click me over here. And then once I save, check it out. In this case, I'll zoom in and I have my little button component. So of course, I have my button ready to go. And for example, I'm going to go with const, again, some kind of name. I'm going to call this container and I'm going to go with styled. And of course, I'm looking for the div in this case. So I create a div and again, I just set up whatever styles I would want over here. And again, I'm going to go with some kind of colors because it's just going to be easier. So background, and we're going to go with the red here. Maybe a color is going to be again white. And the font size is going to be 2 rems. And then right after the button, we set up our container. So, and then place whatever we would want. So if you want to place, for example, here a div inside of this container, you can simply say div and then maybe a heading 3 with a text of hello and then world. So once you save it, notice we have the container and then right away I have some kind of styles. And then in here, of course, I have the text and I'm getting these styles from my div. Now where styled components truly shine is the fact that once I have my styled component, I can set up a class inside of it. and there's going to be no name collisions. And the way it's going to look like, for example, I have the container over here, and I'm going to come up with another div. So inside of this container, and we're just going to give it the class name of hero, something like this. And then inside of this hero, we'll say hero text. So now, of course, in the styled component, I can select this class. So essentially, I can select whatever I would want in the container as long as it is in the container. So I could select a div, I could select the heading 3, and of course, I can also select classes. So the way it's going to work, I'm going to go with hero, and then maybe in this case, I'm going to go with font size of 8 REMs. So I make this text way bigger, correct? Now, what's really cool is, again, if we navigate to the bigger screen, notice we have this specific class name. So that's the one that's going to be unique for my container div. And then that's why if I select this hero, it's going to have this specific class name and then the font size. So there's going to be no name collisions. So if I go back to the app.js, and if I copy and paste, and if I'll set up container number 2 and essentially repeat the same steps, I'm going to copy and paste, and I'll name this container number 2. I'll still have the heading 3. I'll still have the hero. But in this case, if I set up my container number 2 hero text, for example, to be smaller, be, I don't know, 1 REMs, you'll notice that essentially I can just get lazy. Where in this case, I can go with the class name of hero, and this is going to be styled the 8 REMs or whatever font size you set. And then for the second one, for the container number 2, I can still use the same class name, but now, of course, the style is going to be different. Style is going to be whatever I have in the container. And what I'm getting at is the fact that in all of my components, I don't have to be original with my class names. I can set up my component. I set it up as styled component, and I'll show you how I do that in a second. And then inside of that styled component, essentially, I can just use the same class names that I'm using in other components. And that is very, very beneficial because, again, I know I said this already 20,000 times, but when it comes to bigger project, that is one of the annoying things where you need to get really creative with a class names when it comes to CSS, and styled components takes care of that. And once we understand the basics, how we can set up styled components, now, of course, we also need to take a look what happens if we have React component. Because in this case, of course, yes, it is a React component, but we created that using the styled component. But what if I would want to add some kind of functionality? Now, if you want, you can keep it for your reference. In my case, I will remove it because app.js is getting quite busy, and I'll remove these suckers as well. And for testing purposes, right next to the app.js, so let me close all the folders so I don't place it somewhere where I don't want to. In the source, I'm going to create testing.js. And you can probably already guess that. I will delete this component once I'm done. So I'll use my snippets to create a new component, like so. And well, there are many ways how you can export this component using styled components as well. So keep in mind, this is going to be some kind of functionality, right? So maybe some button or whatever, right? Now we would need to import styled component, styled from styled components. And there's many ways how we can export this particular component. But the way I like to do it is following, where I go with the name of a wrapper, and I just like this type of name, but of course you can call it whatever you'd want. Then I create the element that is going to be displayed here in a component, whether that is the main element, whether that is a div, section, whatever is the actual React component doing. And then I'm going to go with dot with the name of that component. In this case, maybe let me go with section, and then I apply my styles. And what I do is here, I usually set it up as a main element that I'm returning. Now, sometimes I set up as a React fragment. As we're going to be working on a project, you'll see how it looks like in that case. But I have my wrapper. So that's my styled component. And then whatever functionality I place inside, this is going to be sitting in a wrapper. And here I can apply all my styles. So if I go with heading 3 and hello world, and then maybe I'll add here a paragraph of hello and then people. And then, I don't know, I'm going to go with button and I'll say click me. Now in this wrapper, I can just style it and I don't need to stress about the class names or about the elements. So when I'll style them here, if I'll say heading 3 and I don't know, I'm going to go with color and red, this is just going to be styled for this particular component. And then in order to render it, we would need to go back to app.js. Now I don't need the styled components anymore since I'm already importing from there. And we go with testing from, and then testing. Let's see, here it is, testing. And then right after the heading 4, we're just going to render the testing. So now I have my component and I might need to, and by the way, sorry, should be export default. So in this case, I'm going to remove the export and we're going to say export default. And then of course, the name is testing over here. Let's save. This should work. And now notice this heading 3 is only going to be styled in red in this component. That's why if you take a look at the components, wrapper does not, and let me repeat, it does not add any functionality. This is just so I can be lazy with the class names and not to worry about the name collisions. Now, I have to be honest, there's more features that styled components provide, but the reasons why I like them so much are following. I like the fact that I can nest over here. So notice I have the class of colors. And once we set up the component in that colors div, there's going to be a span and I can directly style the span. So again, there's going to be no name collisions. And I also really like styled components because I don't have to place all my styles in the index CSS. So it's way harder to navigate. For example, if I'm setting up this component and if I need to change around as far as CSS is concerned, I simply navigate to that component and then I can see all the styles that I've used over here, apart from if I'm using some global class. You notice there are a few global classes, like for example, for a button, then of course it is a little bit different. But one thing I would want you to understand that this wrapper that we're going to add pretty much to all the components that we're going to create together does not affect functionality. Let me repeat, it does not affect functionality. This is just for styling. So in a wrapper, there's going to be a class by the name of link container, and then I'm just applying these styles. Same goes for link button, and hopefully you get the gist. Again, if you want to find out more about styled components, either you can utilize my course or you can go to their docs and explore more. But this is the general setup where if we would have only the style component, then of course I would just render it like so. But then if I have a component, usually what I like to do is wrap my whole React component in the style component and then apply whatever styles I would want. And then quickly, if you want to see nesting, for example, here, I'm going to have div with a class of, I don't know, article. And then inside of this article, I'm going to have a paragraph of this is article. What you'll notice that if I, and by the way, my typing is as always terrible. So if we go with class of article, and then just like in Sass, if we would want to nest it, notice I select article class, and then inside of it, I go with paragraph, and I don't know, I'm going to go with color green. You'll notice that only the paragraph that is sitting inside of the article is green. Now be careful with this one, because there's going to be some cases that you would want to override this. And of course, this is going to be way more specific. So for example, if you're going to go in the next line and say that all the paragraphs should be, I don't know, blue, then of course, only the first one is going to turn blue, because this one is having a larger specificity. So that's why this will stay green. So what I'm trying to say is I wouldn't suggest nesting these selectors 7 levels deep, because you also need to keep in mind that, for example, if you hover over the element or whatever, you also would need to retype the same nested selection. Yes, once in a while I use these nested selectors and they're pretty cool, but I wouldn't suggest overdoing that. Hopefully, we're clear with the basics, and now we can finally start working on some functionality.